bar? Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Apologies for the technical difficulties, and thanks to the witnesses for being here and for your testimony. Mr. Frazier, I wanted to pick up with you and actually thank you for bringing an important note of reality regarding the operations of the Central Valley and State Water Projects in the Bay Delta of California to this discussion today. You are correctly informed that the environmental restrictions under the biological opinion have had minimal impacts on water supply deliveries. In fact, you're corroborated on just about every score in the statement that you made today. The state and federal water contractors have acknowledged that there has been only minimal effects on water deliveries over the past 6 months. The director of the California Department of Water Resources, who has served under both Republican and Democratic administrations, has said the same thing. It is a matter of basic fact, and yet it does not square with the narrative of this hearing, which is all about positioning the Endangered Species Act as a scapegoat. So I thank you for pointing out what you did point out. We're going to consider a bill a little bit later this morning that would basically shred the best available science as embodied in biological opinion that has been affirmed by the National Academy of Sciences and so far affirmed against every legal challenge that we've seen thrown at it. In place of that protection, we have a bill that would hardwire for 7 months of the year negative flow in one of the largest rivers in California at the rate of at least 5,000 CFS, flowing in the wrong direction. To give you a little context, because this is also part of the context along with your factual statement, sir, take a look at the Potomac River when you leave the Capitol. 5,000 CFS in the wrong direction is about twice as much flow as the Potomac currently has in the right direction. So think about that. 5,000 CFS is greater than the flow today in the Rio Grande. It is greater than the flow of just about every river in Oregon that I can find and every river in California. So the factual context of this very political discussion of the Endangered Species Act that we're having today is very important to keep in mind. With that, I would like to ask you about the legislation involving settlements. Is it fair to say, Mr. Frazier, that if this legislation were law, it would, well, I'm going to ask you to describe how it would affect your ability to settle cases where, frankly, the federal government is going to lose, and what that does to costs and to the budget of your agency and your ability to carry out your Endangered Species Act responsibilities.
As we read the bill, it would remove any incentive for plaintiffs to settle a case. And most of the deadline cases in which we do enter into settlement agreements are, as you said, ones for which we have no defense. There's a hard statutory deadline. We've failed to meet it for whatever purpose. We have no defense. We always find it, we almost always find it to be in the interest of the government and ultimately in the interest of the taxpayer to settle and minimize the costs of addressing that complaint. And ultimately, all we're doing is committing to carry out a responsibility that the Act gives to us. It doesn't make any commitment. We don't make any commitment with regard to our final decision, the merits of the decision. We just commit to carry out the process as required by the Act.
All right, thank you very much. Mr. Fishman, I'd like to ask you the same question. Based on your expertise in the Endangered Species Act, how will this affect the ability, and we know that the Fish and Wildlife Service, for example, sometimes blows a deadline. Sometimes blows a deadline because Congress hasn't given it enough funding to actually do its job and gets put in this impossible situation and then gets sued for blowing the deadline. What does a piece of legislation like this do, and what are the broader ramifications for the agency's ability to stretch its dollars and do its job?
Well, I think to some extent, I think to some extent it's like dealing with the problem of weight gain by buying a longer belt and then deciding that the problem has been solved. The combination of increased numbers of species becoming scarce and endangered, along with flat budgets, creates the problem of the listing agencies being unable to keep up with their responsibility under the Endangered Species Act. Shutting down lawsuits doesn't change that reality. And without dealing with both issues, both the funding side and with the problem of there not being any safety net until species get to the brink of extinction. Without dealing with those two issues, shutting down lawsuits or altering the way conflict is managed won't get to the fundamental problem.
Thanks very much.
Time of the gentleman has expired. I recognize the gentleman.